All right, we are back with NBA coverage, and in this one, I'm going to be covering the games that I watched yesterday. We're still in the very beginning of the NBA season, and at least I can say that I'm going to start things off way earlier than I did last year. Essentially, just going to be doing these on all the specific game action that I'm watching live at any given moment, instead of trying to pump everything together like that, because it really does not make that much sense in the world to just jam all that in there. Gotta at least give these games their fair share. So to start things off with yesterday night's first game in the Timberwolves and the Knicks, both of these teams to start the season had been struggling. They'd been meddling for most of this point. Now, we can make the argument that they haven't had their core together for enough time yet. For example, Josh Hart was missing the first few games getting his finger sorted out. And then Anthony Edwards most recently had been dealing with a hamstring strain that took him out for the last week or so. So naturally, it's going to be tough for those teams to weather the storm that way. But at the very least, most of these guys appeared to be back for this game. And it felt as though Anthony Edwards being back on the Timberwolves side would be huge. At least that's the way in which it was looking a little bit earlier on the game. You had Anthony Edwards cap off one possession, getting one of his signature layups in as the Timberwolves continued to push momentum to start things off, holding a 9-point lead. But from there, it just became more of a slugfest. You had both teams getting into their sets really well, and then three-pointers started to just absolutely torch the Timberwolves. I don't know how this would happen more often than not, but you had Yabusele, for example, on one possession later on in this first quarter, just finding himself wide open in the corner for a shot. And they also let similar things happen with Josh Hart, who was just a flamethrower from deep in this game, apparently. They kept on pushing inside and having the defense collapse, allowing those wide open shots. And ultimately, in this first quarter, the Knicks started to take back full control as you had other guys sub out of the game. Now, I couldn't really tell you as things continued to go on why they would allow Rob Dillingham to get any reps in this game. But defensively, that would just continue to hurt him. It's not even like Jalen Brunson was doing a lot of the damage. Anthony Edwards himself was getting in for some defensive sets against him and playing him perfectly. Honestly, he could not really get much to go. But Anthony Edwards himself, outside of a few buckets and a few defensive plays, was also not very into the game as you would expect, which, granted, there's a little bit of a pass for that. He's coming off of a hamstring injury, missing an entire week of action, so that makes sense. Yet, nothing could account for them allowing Karl Anthony Towns to just get going. Like, yeah, OG Anunoby had a three-pointer in this, but man, Karl Anthony Towns was on a personal run of his own, just taking it straight to the defense. I mean, you get one play in the sequence. He's taken Rudy Gobert, who was for some reason up on the perimeter, and you definitely had your fair share of that in this game, don't get me wrong. He takes the man off of the fucking dribble and just dunks it right over him, jammed it straight up. Rudy Gobert didn't even jump in that situation because he knew it would have made him look even worse in the entire ordeal. And when you have your supposed defensive player of the year going out like that, it just opens things up even more for any team trying to run a particular set. Now, at the very least, the Timberwolves, with Dante DiVincenzo's efforts, I mean, he definitely started off the game cold and just went off in the second quarter for 12 points and 4 threes. He was certainly keeping them alive with some of his efforts, and that proficiency from deep kind of trickled down a little bit to some of his other teammates. So it kept this close through and through. Jaden McDaniels, by the way, as well, with some of what he was doing. I don't know, you could argue that from, a certain point towards the tail end of the season last year into the postseason, and then to start out this regular season. Like, Jaden Daniels has just emerged as a potential third option for this team at times. It's really interesting to see. Like, he was getting in a post move, for example, in one of the earlier possessions, and he just had soft touch around the rim, catching that one straight in. It can certainly help if they can get their wing defender, usually in McDaniels, to start developing that out even more over time. Anything you can do to take the pressure off of Anthony Edwards, you will certainly accept. And he, ironically enough, would ultimately allow them to take the lead for a brief period of time in this second quarter as things were winding down. And while they would extend it, man, the one thing that would consistently haunt the Timberwolves throughout the rest of this game, and even early on, offensive rebounding. I mean, it's not like the Knicks were being the most accurate in terms of straight up shooting, but they were taking time off the clock and buying themselves extra time, extra room to work with by stealing other possessions away from Minnesota. So even though Julius Randle was also putting together a solid outing, he had like 10 or so first quarter points just coming out the gates, using his physicality to his advantage and exploiting some mismatches there. If they couldn't buy an offensive rebound to save their lives, like the Knicks were right in this thing. And that would continue to happen. By himself, Mitchell Robinson, at a point in this game, as it just ended up getting more out of hand, would have like 6 offensive rebounds at some point. And he probably ended with a little more than that. It was just like, what? What in the world is going on here? And promptly, the Knicks, although the Timberwolves got the scoring started in the second half, the Knicks went on a pretty good run of their own. And Jalen Brunson, as they were getting themselves reasserted, he started to wake up a little bit. The second this man pulled off that step back jumper and got Rudy Gobert to completely freeze up to take the lead back, you could tell he was going to start hitting his groove from there. And OG Anunoby continued to hit some pretty weird shots and have some good all-around defense. I mean, the man had a good steal leading right into an easy layup. And then also, later on as the game continued to progress, he kind of had a weird hesitation, I should say, as he got yet another steal. I don't really know what he was thinking in the moment. Maybe he was considering dunking it, but seeing as the defense had him covered, he switched to a layup and it ended up paying off. The Timberwolves at this point felt as though they were just settling, and once again, allowing Mitchell Robinson and other guys like Miles McBride, for example, continue to get their own shots back and being caught out of position as a result absolutely hurt them down the line here. By the time that Jalen Brunson just kept his shit going, he had 12 overall third quarter points in this period and just got in some clean three-pointers to accentuate the point. The Knicks were riding absolutely high, even though it would be an 8-point game by the end of the third. And then in the fourth quarter, it was close for a while. The Timberwolves tried their absolute hardest. Again, those untimely turnovers and the absolutely devastating ability of the Knicks to get the advantage in rebounds and extra possessions here ultimately ate away at any chance the Timberwolves had of winning this thing. And by the time they subbed in some of these other people, the league got as high as 22 at this point. And you had them just consistently locking up Minnesota's offensive possessions here. They couldn't do anything for a good amount of minutes on end at this point. And as they continued to settle for subbing in guys like Dillingham, for example, this was one of their lineups at 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, Johan Berringer, Joe Ingles, and Bones Holland. They conceded right then and right there. And again, go back at this point, as I said, man, brother was getting exposed. Miles McBride himself just taking it right at Rudy Gobert off of an offensive rebound, getting a rainbow shot in the corner for three over him with ease to extend their progress there. As I mentioned, Jalen Brunson just going right at him off screens, carving him up. They continue to do a great job of forcing Rudy Gobert to step outside of that paint. And again, it worked twofold. They were definitely going to get theirs in terms of beating him more often than not. He's not a good perimeter defender. But when you also look at the sheer amount of offensive rebounds that they were able to pull in this one, and the amount of extra possessions that they were able to get themselves, along with a few gimme layups, how many of those shots could have potentially been altered if Rudy Gobert was anywhere near it? Even if we make that much fun of Rudy Gobert around here, the brother is still an elite defensive player, and the length of his wingspan speaks for itself. That's still not something that many teams would like to deal with. You want to get yourself high percentage shots, and they certainly won that battle. Not too dissimilar from how the next game would go, but we'll get to that in a second. And that panned out in a different, more competitive way, we should say. But the Knicks in this game would get themselves a 137-114 win to give themselves an above 500 record as they continue to try to navigate this season, which hopefully, in their perspective, would be a championship winning one. Like I said, offensive rebound battle did enough for them. They had a 21-9 advantage there, and they just completely out-rebounded them. It also helped that those shots correlated to them shooting more efficiently with 53.9% shooting from the field as a team. Three-pointers were about the same, so that wasn't really the factor here at all. And, the Knicks, they just completely made this one-sided when it counted the most. Like I said, the fact that spacing was granted to them as a result of the Timberwolves eventually trying at certain points to figure out different ways to attack this rebounding situation, they let Josh Hart go absolutely crazy. The man shot 4 of 5 from 3 by himself. And you're thinking, that's not something that's ever really going to happen. It did. 18 points for him off the bench as a sixth man and just a single turnover with 5 rebounds and 4 assists. Jalen Brunson had 23 points and 10 assists as well on 20 shooting. OG Anunoby led all scorers for them with 25 and 8 on 10 of 17 shooting with 3 threes. Karl-Anthony Towns had a 15.10 rebound double-double, and Mitchell Robinson pulled 10 rebounds, 9 offensive boards. Craziness. Just wild stuff to think about there. As for the Timberwolves, Julius Randle led all scorers in the game with 32 points and 4 assists on 12 of 21, shooting with 3 threes. DiVincenzo, again, in his vengeance game, played well, but I guess not for long enough to put them over the edge in this one. 21 points for him and 5 threes on 7 of 15 shooting as well. Bit of a rougher game for Anthony Edwards compared to what we're accustomed to seeing. Like I said, he had multiple 40-point games to open the season. And then again, that progress is going to be disrupted with him getting injured. So 15 points rather. 15 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals in 29 minutes of play is a little uncharacteristic, but I'm sure he'll get right back into the flow of things in no time. Michael Conley Jr. had 8 points and 6 assists off the bench as well. And that's interesting for them to have Michael Conley Jr. off the bench. But I suppose they are doing as best as they can to lean on team-oriented playmaking here with their starters. We were saying the same thing about Anthony Edwards in the playoffs when it came to having to get accustomed to passing out of double teams. And now we're just trying to incorporate this generally here. But then you also have Julius Randle being a point forward in some sets, and I don't know how trustworthy that would be for too long. So you're really, at this point, if you're Finch, trying to explore, I suppose. They've had mixed results. They go into a 4-4 record with this loss. So I guess over Tom, they're going to have to figure out something. But I don't know if this would be the solution for them if they're trying to get a genuine playmaker in here. And again, in time, they will want that to be Dillingham. He's going to need work, though. That's the thing. And also with the way the lineup is, even though it didn't in this game necessarily, I guess the mentality is that it would help you defensively. I mean, in theory, you have enough bodies out there to make something of some sort swing your way on that end of the floor. Even if Gobert, DiVincenzo, and Randle at times leave a little to be desired. That much is true. Losing by 23 is definitely devastating, especially for what is considered to be a primetime game. But don't worry, this game right here would not disappoint, depending on what side of your fandom you are on here for either one of these teams. Because the nightcap would see the Spurs and the Lakers face off, and both have had pretty hot starts in interesting ways. Spurs had their first 5-0 start in quite some time. And the Lakers, as much as LeBron wants to potentially scout this team, well, the way that Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves collectively have started off this season as a duo, even though they haven't shared the court in every single game this season, the Lakers are fucking rolling high right now. Coming 6-2 heading into this game. This man, Luka Doncic, is averaging near 40-point triple-double. While Austin Reeves himself, in relief of Doncic at times, with him being out with a finger and a potential leg injury, man put together some career-high nights, including a career-high 51 points against the Kings and a career-high 16 assists, even in a rougher shooting night, along with a game winner against the Timberwolves. So it's definitely looking great. The one thing that could consistently be looked at for the Lakers right now is just how poorly DeAndre Ayton had been playing before this. And especially with the matchup against Wembanyama, who at least through the first 5 games of the season, you could say that he was an MVP candidate at the time. A top 1 or 2 guy there with the fucking shit he had been pulling off at this time. The Lakers themselves had to figure out a creative way to attack him, akin to what the Suns did. For as great as Victor Wembanyama has been to start out this year, his last game before this against the Suns was definitely a dud. One of the worst performances, if not the worst performance he's had as a player in the NBA. And when you're looking at the box score, because again, that game wasn't necessarily live, that was regional, you're asking yourself, now how the hell did the Suns limit Victor Wembanyama to 9 points? From what had been relayed across other media, essentially they had thrown everybody at him in some way and just hoped and prayed that they could get a stop on the man. And it turned out that for that night at least, that would be the case. Would that be a theme though? He's already showcased that he's that damn good of a player to potentially overcome that stuff. But the Lakers would have to make it their mission to find creative ways to somehow, as tall of a task as it literally is, to make Victor Wembanyama a non-factor in this game. And in some cases, they were very successful in pockets, and that's all they needed. I mean, while Victor Wembanyama would literally use his height to his advantage on the very first possession, just getting his own rebound back multiple times before tipping it in, it would actually be Julian Champagnie to get the run of the action going for the Spurs. The man himself had one of the weirdest personal runs you'll ever see in your life. Luka Doncic is still just an absolute fucking beast. We know, again, he is certainly going to get his. But I don't know how to explain this from Champagnie. The man sparked up a corner 3 and I guess drew a foul. They were looking to see whether or not it was common, but they ruled that Marcus Smart actually committed a flagrant foul here. And so they gave him multiple free throws. He made one, and then Champagnie got a dunk in off the baseline for a personal 6-point play in a matter of just a couple possessions. That's not something that you can really make up. I don't know. And he would have a 9-point first quarter as well, getting in the next made bucket for the Spurs here. They just continued to ride that. And yeah, Devin Vassell at points in this game also just being a pretty solid option, just catching the ball, rising up, firing, and making shots that way. But to that extent, the plan had been working. You didn't want this to be all about Victor Wembanyama. You wanted other people to come in there and beat you. And the Spurs had success with that. Other people were definitely going right at the teeth of the defense, taking advantage of all the attention that Wembanyama would get. And in terms of spacing, for a long time in this game, the three-pointer worked to their advantage. Now, the Lakers did keep it competitive even as some of their bench players came into this, but they would not be able to stave off the Lakers long enough, at least for a while. It continued to be as competitive as you could ask for. But at a certain point, the bully ball activated for a brief period of time. And the victim of that was none other than Bronny James, who proceeded to, in a matter of minutes, get his whole body dropped to the floor with a fucking shoulder from Victor Wembanyama to create space and get in a jumper, and then proceed to get dunked on by the man. And it's moments like that make you question, why the fuck was he even anywhere in the vicinity of either one of those plays? This shit is not fair, and granted, you're not gonna have success that much with people guarding him in that fashion. For example, they tried to throw Jake Laravia at Victor Wembanyama multiple times, and I'm like, no, that's not the move. But they figured it out eventually. They did. Sucks that Bronny James had to be on the receiving end of that shit. But, again, yeah, that whole situation. But they got the man in foul trouble. Now, Luka Doncic himself was in foul trouble as well, but whenever the Lakers had Rui Hachimura and Marcus Smart switched onto him, especially Marcus Smart, they did as good of a job as one can do in guarding him. Especially Marcus Smart. Man drew multiple charges on Victor Wembanyama over the course of the game. And at the end of it, Laker broadcaster for ESPN kind of alluded to the notion that, they weren't, or Victor Wembanyama wasn't getting in the spots that he would like to initiate offense at. And that's a testament to how Marcus Smart was playing him. Gonna constantly reiterate this. Because yes, we are in an era of basketball where analytics can definitely influence a lot. You're definitely going to look at the numbers sometimes, and there's always going to be a battle between sticking with those and trusting your gut in terms of making decisions when it comes to, I guess, matchups and things of that nature, right? Fair enough. No amount of X's and O's can make up for a player being able to physically get under your skin. And that's exactly what Marcus Smart did this whole time. It wasn't just the drawn charges. You cannot play a person like Victor Wembanyama scared. It's hard to do when you step onto the court and you see this tall, lanky figure with a bit of muscle on him now coming at you. It's hard. But Marcus Smart got physical with him, doing everything he could, even with his limited height, to get in his chest, get right in his stomach area, do whatever he could to make him uncomfortable. And it seemed to work. And what that did for the Lakers, as we saw throughout the rest of the game as well, it definitely opened up the paint. Now, they kept on putting up graphics that essentially showed that the Spurs would be a worse defense, typically, without Victor Wembanyama being on the court. And it's like, that makes sense. You're possibly talking about the best defensive force in the league. Even with him struggling to score, the man was still using just superhuman reflexes to swat balls out of the air, deflect shots off the fucking backboard. Like, the shit is a cheat code. So, DeAndre Ayton was naturally going to struggle in that situation and was naturally going to be scared off of doing anything. But by getting some easier matchups to work with Wembanyama out of the game, he started to find his footing a little bit. And that would be the key. They just continued to keep it going from there. And, man, I mean, they just continued to get in their bag, bro. No, this happens later. But yeah, they just go on a little bit of a run here. Yeah, Rui Hachimura starting to hit a few three-pointers of his own. And the Spurs, while they do get some responses in, when you have Luka Doncic being able to take it right at Kelly Olynyk for some reason and just consistently go to work like that. Like, there wasn't much the Spurs could do in that moment. I don't know why Olynyk was the matchup there. The initial one saw him look lost as hell. So you already knew that man was about to bait him into some crazy shit. And that is exactly what would happen for an N1. He just would not cool down all around. I mean, the man at a point in the second quarter was on pace for a 5-by-5 ball game. Okay, he had already been on a little bit of a personal run himself, and it was not just the scoring. The man, bro, this pass that comes from Luka Doncic at some point was just absolutely unreal shit. I'm not gonna lie. Now, yeah, the numbers will tell you that Luka Doncic had his 55th career half with 25-5, which is the most in the play-by-play era for any player at the moment. Yet, like, no number, again, can truly encapsulate what the hell you saw this man pull off with the pass, okay? Keep in mind, at this point, this man is being double-teamed by both Stephon Castle and Julian Champagnie as he's on the baseline, facing out of bounds, trying to do something, trying to find a way to get out of this jam. The man takes a fucking step forward, jumps, doesn't even look behind him, doesn't even look anywhere in the area, flips a fucking pass behind his head. No look, he motherfucker. Hits Rui Hachimura perfectly in the hands for a three-pointer in this sequence. And that is the kind of shit that you just cannot teach that. Like, we see Luka Doncic definitely go on all of these flurries sometimes, especially with him as a Laker having some days where he just feels like completely going ballistic from three. And while those can be exhilarating when he's on, bruh, the ability to have those creative passes just adds another dimension to everything. And that's how he's been seen as one of the more versatile offensive weapons, if not, depending on who you ask, a top 5 offensive weapon across all phases of an offense in the NBA right now. And it just continued. The man can be so deceiving with his passes. Now, yeah, Luka Doncic would be in foul trouble for most of the second half, as Victor Wembanyama would also, again, try to break out of the struggle. But again, they were getting all in his grill. They were not giving it to him easy. And you can't, because he does everything too well. That is just something that comes with the territory at that point. But DeAndre Ayton, for as much shit as he has gotten, I will say that as this game wound down, he definitely showed me a lot. Yeah. Even when Victor Wembanyama was in the game, and of course when he wasn't, the man still played with a ton of effort. Like, there were some plays, for instance, if you had him in Wembanyama battling for a rebound, he would get beat, but he did keep on trying to fight for it. Even his ability to just pull down a rebound for free was deterred from Ayton's effort on some of these plays here. And again, he was getting fed. He was getting fed as a result of it. He and Hayes were making the most of their abilities to be lob threats. You would want to see that from DeAndre Ayton a little more because he does have the athleticism over a lot of your centers out here. That was one of his calling cards when he was coming out of the draft in 2018. And he definitely put that on display from time to time in this game when they needed it. Yet, even with all that being said, the Spurs, by this point in the game, had broken away in a little bit because, again, everyone else, whether you look at Stephon Castle, whether you look at Keldon Johnson as a sixth man off the bench, and, again, even to a lesser extent, Harrison Barnes, for example. They were just hitting their shots. Oh, it's also worth noting as well, I should have mentioned that as well. Dylan Harper would not play in this game. In fact, he's going to be out for some time with a left calf strain, unfortunately. So that is something that the Spurs might have been able to utilize in this game. But again, it hadn't been hurting them right now. Man, oh man, oh man. All came down to the fourth quarter, and a lot of chaos would take place. Lots and lots and lots and lots of chaos. While again, Wembanyama had some better faring in this to an extent, like he did have a good pass out of a shot that led to a drawn foul later on in the fourth quarter. But he still, even in the moments where he was given a somewhat clean look, honestly, when you're that tall, anything could be a clean look, depending on where exactly you're shooting the ball from. Even those shots were kind of short-armed from time to time. He just could not find his rhythm in that one. And again, that mostly goes into the way the Lakers and J.J. Redick had dialed up this defense against him. As DeAndre Ayton not only continued to get some good stuff going on the offensive side, but he also, at a certain point, had back-to-back blocks, including one on Stephon Castle and also one on Julian Champagnie as well, to give the Lakers a few pivotal possessions that eventually puts the game within striking distance as we got into the halfway mark of the fourth quarter. And with Rui Hachimura continuing to be a factor in this, his contributions would eventually allow them to inch ever so close, especially with his work for Victor Wembanyama a little bit in this one. Though it got a little dangerous, is he did foul against him twice down the stretch, and so they had to make a switch right then, right there. They deployed Marcus Smart right back in it as we entered clutch time and continued to progress there. And he would get a pivotal one later. He forced one to give never mind. Victor Wembanyama was already at foul number 5 at this point. But he had just started to get some more contact going, get a personal flurry going. And then again, Luka Doncic just ripped it right away from them. But the real gut punch would come from Marcus Smart, like I said. Just continuing to get in there and guard that man up completely. And if it was Smart that continued to get that physical with him and have multiple charges drawn on him, force him into making some unconventional decisions, Also, with some timely rebounds down the stretch as well, it would be Rui Hachimura that, with another charge, would foul Victor Wembanyama out of the game with 1:40 left. And the Lakers already had a 1-point lead at that point. You're thinking that this could ease things up in terms of the Lakers' approach to this. You just got to close out the game. I guess they resorted to fouling, and at that point they had a 4-point advantage as a result of all that. Now the Spurs had a few decisions to make. Because you don't have Wembanyama in down the stretch in a one-possession game, and at that point, he'd be an immediate lob threat, regardless of what the defense schemes up. Now you got to rely on a shot as we get closer and closer towards the end of the game. And with 8 seconds left and a 4-point lead, they had no choice but to chuck some stuff up. They'd miss both of their 3-pointers, and then Kelly Olynyk, with just a smidge of a second left, would get in a bucket. And then Marcus Smart almost single-handedly wiped out all the progress they had in this game. Because, I'm not going to lie, for him to make some of the decisions that he did defensively in this game and have some pretty good moments of basketball IQ in this one, it was rather odd, strange, and just demoralizing almost to a lot of the Lakers fans out there to see this man literally keep one of his feet in bounds and not fully establish himself as a player being out of bounds to force the pass in and then do this. No, he was still in. And the man with 1 foot out of bounds throws a fucking deep ball down the field to try to run out the clock. And they flagged that shit right there because that's not something you can do. It would be a violation. The Spurs would get the ball back on that side of the court. And all of a sudden, it's like, hold on. It could be near impossible for the Spurs to pull it off, but they've got life. They've got life. They had multiple shots at getting a few lobs up, and while they were good looks initially, it would be the second one in which LaRavia was just grabbing Champagne's shit the whole time. And that would warrant a foul with just some tenths of a second left. But if Champagne made them both, it would have tied the game, and it probably could have sent it to overtime. They did the worst thing in the world by mentioning that Champagne had taken a dip in free throw accuracy to start out this year, even with him being a pretty good career free throw shooter. And he missed the first one, which could have effectively sealed things up right then, right there. Everybody in that stadium knew that the second one would have to be an intentional miss. And that's exactly what would happen. Keldon Johnson nearly got it with a little bit of a push-off, but it would miss, and the Lakers would come out with a 118-116 victory to move up to 7-2 on this young season so far. And man, what a wild win it was, but with their overall efforts, they did exactly what they intended. They made Wembanyama a non-factor, and they took great advantage of the non-Wembanyama minutes. Just spamming work consistently in the paint. Because again, yes, Cornette's a big body, but you're more comfortable with going at him. And if you can get mismatches, continue to move this defense around and get smaller bodies in the paint, that's going to lead to even more high percentage shots. And they got that. I mean, Points in the paint, again, they had the advantage. It was the most that the Spurs had allowed this season, I believe, against any one team with 44. And while they shot worse overall a little bit, they did a much better job of protecting the ball. And there you go. Even for Doncic to shoot just 33% from the field in this game, he had 35 points, 13 assists, 5 steals, and 2 blocks. And 9 rebounds. Man, bro, okay. DeAndre Ayton, again, pretty great game for him. Looking at it from a head-to-head perspective, one could say he outplayed Wembanyama, specifically by not having to deal with him as much. And again, you'll take those steps forward. It's a massive step forward for DeAndre Ayton to that extent. But again, you got to see more. 22 points and 10 rebounds on 9 of 13 shooting is not half bad, though. There were still a few head-scratching moments, don't get me wrong. But, baby steps. Baby steps, man. Marcus Smart had 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists with a steal and a block on 3 of 10 shooting. But he had 10 free throws. Rui Hachimura had 15 points on 5 of 9 shooting. And for the Spurs, again, Wembanyama, they mentioned it was only the 3rd time he'd fouled out. 2nd time this season, though. Just watch for that. It is something that has rarely happened in his overall career, but he did foul out in the Pelicans game. Yet the Spurs managed to get in overtime and close it out. In that one, at least. Champagne, even with that 10-point first quarter, just completely phased out of everything. Finished with just 14. Devin Vassell had 15 and 4 assists. Stephon Castle had 16 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, and 3 steals on 3 of 11 shooting. Also had 6 turnovers. And again, they made a really good point as well. He's still not at the stage where he's a true playmaking guard. He's considered to be more of a combo guy because you have a good size advantage and great athleticism compared to a few other point guards in the league. But, he's still got a little bit of a ways to go in terms of playmaking. He's still that young. So it's still going to take a little bit of work, but I think he can get there. He's definitely shown himself to be a solid option on that front already. And it is a problem that could be ailed in a little bit of time if they can get De'Aaron Fox back soon, at least. Not really sure about the timetable on that, but I don't think that he'd be out for much longer. Harrison Barnes had 14 in this game. And Sochan, in what they mentioned, was the first game he's played in this season. Also fouled out in 23 minutes of play, but had 16 points and provided pretty good defense on 6 of 7 shooting. As for a few other developments, I'm going to say this right now. I am very aware of what went down literally just a few hours following the start of the NBA season with the whole sweep that the FBI has done. And I will cover that briefly in another video. Because at the end of the day, the basketball is what makes the most sense to cover. I would want to get a little more into that, or at least have this done, rather than talk about all that stuff going on right now. Because it truly just takes away from it. And there are other developments to come in that, of course, I know. But there's still so much great stuff going on in the sport as it is. And it wouldn't make sense for me to focus more on that than give attention to the players putting it all out there on the line on a night-to-night basis. And putting together some compelling performances, doing their best to go out and put on a show for these people out here. Truly a beautiful game, especially when the integrity is definitely upheld. No question about it. But the actions of a few out there, again, should not take away from attention being cast towards those who are doing what they're supposed to do on and off the court. And just trying to go out there and perform. Go out there and be alongside their fellow teammates, fighting, having fun, doing whatever. All to better themselves on a consistent basis. Like, they are obligated to have that attention. So, again, that stuff I'll briefly get into in a separate one. I'm not going to do that in this. That is not my intent to make my first one of this season and focus exclusively on that. It would not feel right for me to do it like that. Just moving on from that, saving that for one of the next ones. There are some other ones that are relevant here. So the Pelicans would sign DeAndre Jordan and the Grizzlies would sign Charles Bassey at some point last week. Mac McClung, it's just crazy. Sharanya mentioned across this entire time span that last week the Pacers waived James Wiseman. They signed Mac McClung to a multi-year contract extension. I guess it wasn't fully guaranteed, but at that point I'm saying, hey man, opportunity was definitely afoot for the man. McConnell is currently out for a month with an injury of his own. Nembhard has been out for the last few games with a shoulder injury. You know, if you're out there, you give him a chance to get something going, he's got a chance to prove himself, I thought. Today, per Sharanya, they just cut the man. Damn. I mean, okay. What the fuck? Obi Toppin, more Pacers injuries here, is set to miss at least a month of action. Nikola Topic, at some point last week, was diagnosed with testicular cancer, which would explain that injury that they alluded to in one of the previous videos that I mentioned. Because I was wondering, what exactly happened for him to have this kind of injury? It ended up being that. And it's crazy for Topic. It's incredibly unfortunate stuff. The man still has yet to step foot on an NBA court despite already being a more accomplished player than most other people. It seems as though he has the talent to last as a potential point guard option off the bench, for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that squad. But he doesn't even get his chance while dealing with something like this. Hopefully, the most important thing is that he beats it and is able to have that be restored before he thinks about anything basketball related for some time. Anthony Davis would suffer a calf strain. Initially, it looked to be a pretty scary injury, but it would be a low-grade calf strain, so he is still missing a little bit of time at this point, but it's not long-term, and it's definitely not season-ending. Boy. Dereck Lively II would be out with a knee injury, adding more just strife for that Mavericks front court right now. They definitely would love to have those reinforcements, but again, they got to be able to heal up from those things. You want them at 100%. You don't want them going out there at anything less than that. Trae Young would have an MCL sprain as he ran into Muhammad Gay during the game against the Nets over this time. And he is set to be reevaluated in around the next 4 weeks. And probably counting a little bit down from that at this point. But definitely unfortunate for the Hawks. Despite that, they've still been weathering the storm. I definitely could have covered the action on Tuesday, but it's safe to say that the Hawks are making light work of the competition. Between what Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson are doing as two-way players and how their reinforcements, some of which they've gotten through the offseason, have performed as well, especially in that Tuesday night game against the Hawks. Well, against the Magic, rather. They could be able to at least manage well enough to have a winning record while Trae Young is out. Obviously, he being a through-and-through playmaker opens up way more for the team. But again, Dyson Daniels has proven at this point to be no slouch when it comes to being an all-around point guard at this point. Even if he might not have fully mastered the art of playmaking, the defense speaks for itself with him, and Jalen Johnson has proven that he can be a point forward. This is the same man who averaged 20, 10, and 5 last season before going down with injury. And this is the same man who became one of the first players in NBA history to have like 125, 50, and 30 in an NBA season through their first 6 games or so. So yeah, he's definitely, they're going to be able to hold down the fort. They should be fine. The Kings would sign Precious Achiuwa. Zion Williamson is going to be out for a week due to left hamstring strain. The Pelicans did win their first game, but they've still been slumping that hard to where it's like, man, again, he's missing more time. We really need this right now. That's kind of how it's feeling in New Orleans at this point. And for the Jazz, Walker Kessler would suffer a torn labrum and would be ruled out for the season, unfortunately. Started out incredibly well. Consistently has been one of the better shot blockers in the NBA since he's entered. And he'd been putting together some solid offensive production as well, holding down the middle of the field, middle of the court rather, as a 5. It would certainly hurt them short term when it comes to their defense. I mean, sure, you could have Filipowski slide down to the 5, but he's not going to bring the same defensive intensity that we know Walker Kessler can and has to this point in his NBA career. He will definitely be missed on the court. But again, when you're dealing with injuries like that, again, you need all the time imaginable, and honestly then some, to get fully reacquainted with being able to make sure those things work how they're supposed to. So again, while it sucks for Kessler to have his season end this early, while it sucks for anyone to have their season potentially end this early, hey, you got to do what you got to do to conserve yourself for now and just try to fight through it, thrive through the moment, and eventually get back at it when the offseason rolls around, ramp it back up then, and come back next season at a far healthier condition than you are currently at. That's always the plan. But as for the action here, that will do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.